to my channel. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button and click on that bell to be notified of new videos from me. And today we are going to do another card kit video from the Stamps of Life. And this is the January 2020 card kit. So let's go ahead and open this up and see all the fun goodies that are in this kit. So all the kits come with this sample idea card. It just has a couple of samples on it to give you some inspiration. So here's the one for the January kit. And let's go ahead and go through the paper pad. So this paper pad is the Dream Collection. And the colors in this kit are vanilla. Vanilla is actually a new color from the Stamps of Life for this month. They will be starting to have some vanilla cardstock in their store. And actually this kit comes with some of that vanilla cardstock. Cherry, chocolate, kiwi, banana, lemonade, ocean, strawberry, and ginger snap. So, oh, there's a surprise in there. Okay. So let's go ahead and go through this kit. We have our bird houses, and that's the new stamp release for this month for the Stamp and Die Hard Club is the bird houses. So there are some birdhouse paper, and then we have some browns. These papers have the little diamond-shaped lines in them. And then some more birdhouses. These are the ones that you will use your dies to die cut the different birdhouses out. And it tells you die cut with your birdhouses to stamp die set. And we're going to be doing that for this video. Okay, so we have some more. This is the ginger snap with the diamonds. And then some hearts, perfect for Valentine's Day coming up. And then we have just a solid piece. I think that's probably the lemonade. And then some more bird houses, and you could probably use your dies with these and the birds as well. And then we have some more diamond shape, and then the Dream pattern paper, some kiwi and some smaller bird houses, solid blue, some smaller hearts, some strawberry, some smaller birdhouses and smaller birds. Okay, there's the cherry, a little birdie told me. Okay, and some dots, and smaller, a little birdie told me. Smaller birdhouses, and then it starts back at the beginning. So pretty cute paper pad, and that's the Dream Collection. All right, so what else do we have here? We have these really pretty little embellishments. They almost look like a rhinestone, and they're shaped like a flower in the colors for this month. There's also a cloud die, and starting this month, moving forward, the Stamps of Life, they have removed the twine from the card kit and have replaced it with an additional die. And this is the additional die included with the January kit. And it's a cloud, and there's some stitching around the cloud, and there's also little raindrops inside. So really nice. It's not just a solid die. It actually has some texture there. And then they also have the word Dream with the shadow layer. Here's a stamp set, sending hugs across the miles. Sorry I missed your birthday. Surprise. Hello, my dearest friend, and thanks. Okay, there's two ribbon. One in the cherry, and one, it looks like it's, I don't know, it's probably kiwi polka dots. And then there are some buttons and chipboard pieces. Super cute. The birdhouses, hearts, hello for you, thanks, and some flowers. And then the color palette cardstock that's included in this kit. So we have the cherry, and this is probably one of my favorites, is the cherry and the ocean. This color combination is my absolute favorite. I just love it. And then we have the kiwi. Then we have the lemonade. Then we have the banana. Okay, then we have the strawberry and the chocolate and the ginger snap And then here is that vanilla cardstock. And instead of the powdered sugar, which is the white that normally comes in the kit, they've included 4 pieces of cardstock, which is the new color of this month, which is the vanilla. So that's the color palette for the month. And all of these cardstock pieces, they all coordinate with this pattern paper pad, and it has all the colors listed here below. So, and then of course you get your envelopes, and these are in the vanilla to match the cardstock. So that is the club kit for this month. And really quick, I just want to show you the stamp and die hard set this month. It is the birdhouses to stamp. It does have the birdhouses as well as the dies to coordinate. So if you're in the stamp club, you get this. If you're in the die hard club, you get both the dies and the stamps. So I will be incorporating these with the card kit. I'm not sure how much stamping I'm gonna do, but definitely I'm gonna be using the dies. And I did do a card that featured the stamps. It was a slimline card. I did a video. So if you missed that, go back and check that out. It's this card here using the stamps, stamped and colored, and then die cut those out. So check that out if you haven't seen that. So let's go ahead and make some cards. I'm going to start off, and I'm going to take out this piece of paper, which is what I'm going to die cut. And I'm going to be using my corresponding dies to die cut out these birdhouses. So make sure when you do this that you're using washi tape to adhere your dies so that they don't move around. That way you can use every single one of these. So we're going to die cut all of these birdhouses and use those on our cards. Okay, and I'm also going to be using this sheet. This has some of the larger birdhouses on it, and these dies will also cut those out, as well as the die for the birds. Now you're just using the shadow layers. You're not using, so each die, remember, has this piece as well as the shadow layer. You're just using the shadow layers to cut these out. So I'll have to run these through a few times to get them all cut out, and I'll be right back. So I went ahead and die cut all of my pieces, and I have 38 birdhouses, and I have a whole bunch of these cute little birds. And since each sheet in the paper pad has 2 of the same sheet, I went ahead and die cut both sheets of the smaller birdhouses and both sheets of the larger birdhouses. So all of my pieces are die cut from the paper pad. So now I'm ready to make some cards. For this first card, I'm going to be using a lemonade card base in an A2 size, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. The cherry pattern paper is measured 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. The lemonade solid cardstock is measured 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. This cherry solid cardstock is 3 1/8 by 4 1/8. And the hearts pattern paper is measured 3 by 4. And I'm going to go ahead and start adhering these pages together just using some of my art glitter glue. So the pattern paper will go on top of the cherry, and then on top of the lemonade, and so on and so forth. So here I'm layering the pattern paper on top of the card base. I did cut a strip of lemonade. This is measured 1 inch by 4 1/8, and that's just adhered to the center of the card. And then this layer is going to be adhered kind of like at a diagonal, not straight, but just at a diagonal. I think it'll add some character to the card. I am using the cutouts for the birdhouse, and I did take a gingerbread piece of paper to cut out that stand. Notice that the birdhouse is all the similar colors in the cardstock, so everything's matching. And I am using some chipboard hearts to decorate on the top of the card, as well as a bird in the cherry color and the congrats sentiment from the chipboard pieces. So I think all of these colors turned out really, really cute together. And I'm also taking a ribbon, just tie it in a bow and adhere it to the bottom of the birdhouse, and that completes card 1. For this next card, I am using 2 rectangle dies and I'm just taping them together with some washi tape, and I'm going to run that through my die cut using this cherry cardstock. And what that does is it will create a nice border that I can use on my card. That middle piece you can just save for another project, but this is the border that I'm going to be using. So I'm just adding some glue to the back of the border and I'm attaching it to vellum. And notice that I'm just attaching it so that it's even on the top and left, and then I can just snip off the bottom and the right side of the vellum. That way all that vellum sits perfectly underneath that border. And then just flipping that over, adding some more glue to the border, which is actually attached to the vellum, and then putting it on my cardstock, actually my pattern paper panel, and I'm using the hearts and just cutting off the excess. And I think that this vellum, it just softens the look of the pattern paper. I'm going to be using the cloud die that came in the kit. I cut out the front piece with powdered sugar, which I had to go to my stash to get since it wasn't included in the kit. And then the shadow piece I cut with ocean. And then I'm taking that entire card layer and attaching it to the front of an ocean A2 size card base. And here I'm just positioning things on the card where I want them to go. The birdhouse stand was cut out of ginger snap using the dies in the birdhouses to stamp die set. And then I'm going to attach one of the clouds, but I'm not going to fully attach it. I'm actually going to leave the bottom open. Notice I didn't press it fully down. And then I'm going to start attaching my birdhouse. I did not attach the cloud on the right yet because I'm going to be adding some things underneath, as you'll see in just a minute. I am taking one of the birdhouse dies, and there's a heart in the middle, and I'm taking some cherry scraps and I'm just die cutting it several times because I want several hearts. And what I'm doing here is I am just cutting some twine, probably in about 1, maybe 1.5 inch strips, and I want the hearts to look like they're falling out of the clouds. So I'm using a small glue dot and attaching the glue dot to the back of the heart, and then attaching the twine to the back of the heart, which grabs onto the glue, and then just sticking that heart onto the vellum. And then notice that the strings will be underneath the cloud, and I will cut those off in a few minutes. After I get all of my hearts situated on the card, then all of those extra pieces of twine will be snipped off the edges. So again, just taking the heart, putting a glue dot on the back, and then adding the twine to the glue so it sticks, and then just placing those hearts on the top of the vellum. And when I place the hearts on the vellum, I'm trying to go over top of one of the hearts that is in the pattern paper, just so that I'm not adding extra hearts between the hearts, because then I feel like it might look a little bit cluttered. But those hearts are the same exact size as the hearts in that pattern paper, so they actually fit perfectly on top of those hearts. Okay, and then I just snip off the edges of the twine just so that none are sticking out from above the clouds. And then I tuck that one underneath that cloud on the left, and then just add some glue just to press the rest of that cloud down to the card front. Now I'm taking some more glue dots and just adding the twine, just adding it to the top of the twine, because I want the twine to be in a straight line, and that ensures that my twine is straight just by gluing it down. And that will be hidden underneath the cloud, so you won't see it. And then adding some foam to that cloud, because this cloud is going to be raised above the cloud on the left. And then I'm using the dream sentiment that came in the card kit, and I cut the background shadow out of powdered sugar. Again, I did have to go in my stash for that, but I wanted it in the powdered sugar because it matched the clouds. And then the word dream is cut in the ocean, and then I adhered that to the bottom of the card. When I adhered the word dream to the bottom of the card, I just kind of covered up the line between the border and the vellum. And that completes this card. For this next card, I'm using ginger snap cardstock and an A2 size card base. I also have some pattern paper, which I'm using the red side of the pattern paper. The larger red one is cut to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. The smaller red pattern paper is cut to 1 7/8 by 5 3/8. It really doesn't matter how long the edge is as long as it's at least 5 3/8 because you can snip the rest off, and you'll see what I'm talking about in just a moment. Then I'll be using this piece of pattern paper. One side is polka dots and the opposite side is the yellow pattern. I'll be using the large polka dot piece, which measures 4 and 5 1/4. So that's 4 by 5 1/4. And the smaller yellow piece, which measures 1 3/4 by 5 3/8. Again, as long as it's at least 5 3/8, because we can snip the rest off as we put the card pieces together. I will also be using some chipboard pieces. And I'm going to start off by adhering the smaller yellow piece of paper to the red paper. When I adhere it, I'm going to make sure it's flush on the left, just a little bit of red showing at the top and bottom, and I'm going to take the two pieces, hold it so it's flush on the left side of the larger piece, and then I'm just going to snip off the excess. Next, I'm going to take some twine. This twine is from my stash, and just wrap it around probably about 3 times that smaller piece, and then just tie that twine in a bow, and the bow will be positioned off to the left side of that layer. And snip off the edges. And this is just a like a ginger snap color twine, which matches those chipboard pieces. Then I'm going to start adhering the pages or the papers together. So attaching the larger red pattern paper onto the card base, and then the polka dot on top of the red, and then this shorter piece is going to be attached right in the middle of that card. And you will have to press down pretty hard and make sure it's held in place because that twine is in the middle of the back of that cardstock. Okay, so I'm adding some foam on the top and bottom of these chipboard pieces. I don't put foam in the middle because, again, you have the twine, which adds that dimension. So you have to put the foam on the back of these, and you can't just tape or glue them down because that twine is there. And if you don't and you just try to glue them down, the chipboard pieces will not adhere flat to that layer. So adding the foam at the top and bottom and leaving space for the twine is an important step for everything to be placed flat against the card. And here's my final card. For this next card, I'm going to use the Flower, Vine, and Grid A2 card set. This set comes with 2 card designs. One of the designs is the vine background, which shows on the left. The other design on the right has 6 different boxes that you can put different things in. It also includes several flower dies that you can use for the card. This piece actually makes an A2 card base, the large piece. So if you don't want to cut and score your paper to make the base, that's what that large die cut piece is used for. I'm going to use the vine design for the card that I'm making now, and I'm using a piece of the kiwi cardstock, and I just cut it down to size, and I'm going to add some double-sided adhesive to the back. That way when the design is cut out, it's easier to stick to the card panel with the double-sided adhesive. If you don't use the double-sided adhesive, then you'll just have to glue all of those vines down. So I'm just trimming off the excess adhesive, and then I'm going to take these 2 pieces. It has a large rectangle piece as well as the vine piece, and those need to be placed one inside the other. If you don't place them one inside the other, your entire vine will not be cut out of the cardstock. Instead, it will cut the vine into the cardstock, and you will not be able to put it on a card front. And I am going to be using the chocolate cardstock for the A2 size card base, and you can use that large die to cut that out. And then the larger rectangle die, you'll just need to cut that out of the cherry cardstock, and that's just going to be for a background so that the vines show through the background of that cherry cardstock. And here I'm just using some kiwi ink and just ink blending, just adding some texture to some of those vines, and then just peeling off the double-sided adhesive and getting all of those extra pieces that are not needed out of that die and then adhering it to the cherry cardstock. When you adhere this, remember it has the double-sided adhesive on the back, so I suggest placing the corners first and the edges first before adhering all of the vines to the card front. I'm also going to be using some of the flowers in the die set. Now some of the flowers have a hole and some do not, and how to tell the difference is that when you look at your die, if you're looking at the die and you see that the die where the hole is flat, it means it's not going to cut out a circle in the middle. If the flower die has a rigid edge around the circle, then it will cut out the center of your circle in the flower. So that's a good tip for you. So I just cut those flowers out of the vanilla cardstock. Some of them I do have to cut the edges off because they are placed right on the border of that panel, just as you see there. Well, that's no big deal. And then just putting some glue on the flowers and adhering them to the top of that card panel. And the holes do have the middles showing, and I will later on, I'll put some Nuvo drops over that to fill in those holes and add some dimension. I'm not going to cover up every single flower on this card front because I am going to put some birdhouses on this card and it will cover them up anyway, so there's no point in doing the extra work. And again, I'm using some of the birdhouses with the cherry color. I think that really makes that cherry color pop. I did use the birdhouses to stamp die set for those stands, and I used the die to cut out the chocolate stands, the chocolate cardstock. It will match my card base. That's why I chose the chocolate. And then adding some foam to the back side of these birdhouses to have them add some dimension. Using just an acrylic block there to hold those stands in place. I am using a rectangle die to cut out a piece of vanilla cardstock for the sentiment thanks, and that sentiment stamp comes in the card kit. And then just using a piece of chocolate cardstock to cut around that to add a background. Adding some foam to the back of the sentiment and adding it to the top of that card layer. I am going to attach a bird. I put glue on the left side of the bird, and then I just add some foam to the right side of the bird because the bird is actually attached to the birdhouse. So the foam part needs to be attached to the card base. And then just attaching that panel onto the chocolate card base. And I do cut a piece of vanilla cardstock measured 4 by 5 inches for the inside of the card in order to write your message. And here I'm using some Nuvo Jewel Drops in Strawberry Colas, and I'm just adding centers to the middle of those flowers. Again, it's just some more added dimension to that card. I do add a few of the drops on the sentiment, and that completes this card. For this next card, I'm also going to be using this vine grid die, and I'm using kiwi cardstock and just cut out that background again. I showed you how to do that in the previous card. The only difference is I did not add double-sided adhesive to the back of the cardstock before running it through my die cut machine because I'm going to cut some of that border away, and it's easier for me to use the scissors without having the adhesive attached. And I'm also going to incorporate this Die Grid 2 die set. So that set has 2 pieces as you see here, and again one needs to be layered inside the other. So the grid needs to be layered inside of that large rectangle. And you will need to attach those pieces together using washi tape. And once that comes out of the die cut machine, you can dispose of the middle pieces and the outline border, and all you need is the grid piece. You're also going to take a piece of cardboard. This is just an old box that I had, and I'm going to use that same grid, washi tape still in place, and I'm going to cut that out again because I want to add dimension to my grid. So I'm using some cardboard in order to do that. So dispose of the middle pieces and the background piece, or if you wanted to keep it for some type of border for your cards, you can do that. I just have to snip this part away because it didn't cut all the way through in the die cut, no big deal. And then the cardboard piece is going to go underneath the ginger snap piece that I cut out. So I'm just going to attach those with glue. Now if you used a pattern paper or different color cardstock, this is the piece for your grid. This is the piece that you're putting glue on. In my case, it's the ginger snap piece. So the pattern paper or whatever the colored cardstock goes on top of the cardboard, and then just attach those together, and that's going to add some nice dimension to your card. So just make sure all those edges are nice and aligned. Okay, next I'm going to just line this up, line the grid up with my vine, and I'm going to trim off that green border that shows in that background, which I tried to put washi tape, kind of hold this in place. It kind of really didn't work. It kind of moved all around, but all in all, if I were to do this again, I would not line it up. I would just take that green border and just trim off, or should take the green vine piece and just trim off that solid border that appears around it, and all I would have left are the vines. So really there was no need for me to align these together like this, because it was kind of all flipping and flopping around anyway. So just take your vine piece and just cut that border off, and it's going to do the same thing. Okay, so that's the piece that you're going to be left with, just the vine, the middle of the vine. Now if you don't care about that green border showing, you can just leave it on there and put that on your card layer. You're also going to take this large rectangle piece from the die set, from the grid die set, and just cut out a rectangle in the vanilla. That's going to be the background. See, I didn't want the green showing past that grid, if you know what I mean. That's why I cut that off. Anyway, so now I'm going to take my vine and I'm just going to add my glue. So just going to add the glue all over the back of those little pieces. And then when I'm finished, I'm just going to turn it over and apply it directly to the large vanilla rectangular layer. So before I press down fully, I just want to align it so that all of those vines are within that die grid. I don't want any sticking out, because the whole purpose of this is to look like a window, and you're looking out and you see vines, you see the trees in the background. Once I have it where I want it, just press down to attach the vine to that card layer. I'm just holding it down with some acrylic blocks. And then I did use some strawberry cardstock, and I used the flower dies that came in the vine grid die set, and I cut some of those flowers out with the strawberry cardstock, and then I'm just attaching them to my card layer. I only cut a few out. I didn't want to cover up all of them. I just did a few. And then I'm going to take my grid die cut and just add glue to the back. And I am going to add that directly to the front of that card layer. So make sure when you position it that all your flowers and your vines are within that window. And then I'm going to take some birdhouses, and I did add some foam to the back, and I'm positioning them off kind of to the sides of the windows just to make it look like it's sitting on a windowsill. So I just put some foam on like one of the on the top birdhouse. The foam is on the right edge only. And then I did use some of the chipboard pieces, and I used the For You chipboard piece, and I am going to use a bird, again, added some foam, and I'm going to make it look like that bird is just sitting on top of that chipboard sentiment. And then I'm going to take that entire layer and just add some glue to the back and add that to the front of a card base that is cut with the strawberry cardstock. And that will complete this card. I think that turned out super cute. For For this next card, I'm using a vanilla A2 size card base. The strawberry solid, this is pattern paper. It's 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. The ocean is 4 by 5 1/4. The vanilla on the left is 2 by 4 3/4, and the one on the right is 2 1/2 by 3 1/2. The strawberry pattern paper is 1 7/8 by 4 3/8, and then 2 3/8 by 3 3/8. And then the birdhouse pattern is 2 1/4 by 3 1/4. I'm also using some scalloped dies, circle dies, and some regular circle dies. The scalloped circle is cut out of the ocean, and then the circle die is cut out of the vanilla. And now I'm just adhering some of these layers together. This card more or less is all about just using some of the papers, not really using any birdhouses on this except for the birdhouse pattern paper that I had cut the small piece. So my focal point of the card is going to end up being the birdhouse pattern paper that I'm applying here, as well as the circle, which is going to have my sentiment on it. I am going to go ahead and add some twine around this larger piece. This is just some ginger snap colored twine, and just wrap it around a couple of times around this larger piece, and that's going to lay underneath of the other paper layers that you see there on the right. So on the back side of this, I'm just going to attach it with some double-sided tape just to hold that in place, and just make sure all the twine is even and flat. And then I'm going to add some liquid glue onto the back. And because that twine is there and it's adding some dimension to the back, when you adhere this layer onto the card panel, you will need to press down and maybe hold it there just a few seconds until that dries. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some foam. This is just some thin foam that I'm adding to this rectangular layer. I want it to have some dimension there, especially because that twine is there. Notice how I left a space with that foam and did not cover that foam over the entire layer. There's a space in the middle. That space in the middle is for the twine, just so that it will sit nicely and still sit flat on that card. Okay, and then with this birdhouse panel, I'm going to have to put some foam as well. I'm just marking where I want the foam to go, so the foam will be on the right side of that line, because on the left side of that line is where I'm going to add some glue, and it's going to attach flat to that red panel. And here I forgot to add the space for the twine, so I have to cut a little space out. Just redo that, otherwise it's not going to sit flat, because again that twine adds that dimension there. So make sure you leave your space if you are replicating this card. So go ahead and remove the foam and then attach that panel right onto that card base. So there's a lot of dimension going on with all of these panels since I've added a lot of foam. I am using a stamp in the Birdhouses to Stamp set. It's the Hello There. And I'm inking it up in the strawberry ink and stamping it on the circle. And that circle will adhere nicely over top of that scalloped circle. And then just adding this onto the card, just right in the middle there, so it's in the middle of where the twine is underneath. And that completes the card, so pretty simple. For this next card, I'm using the center step card die, and I cut that out of vanilla cardstock. And for the layering pieces, I am using some heart pattern paper, and I'm also using some solid color ocean. Actually, this is my ocean pattern paper that I'm using to layer underneath, which I actually had to cut my own ocean paper because there was not a die for the layering piece. So the one for the large middle part is measured 2.5 by 3.25, and then the ocean paper that's behind the side panels, it's measured 1 1/8 by 3 1/16, and I had to cut 2 of those, one for each side panel, and I just layered those on together just like that. Now for that large middle piece, I did cut the sides off of the heart paper. You can see the left and right sides were cut off, and that's just because I just thought I would save some scraps because that's going to be covered up anyway. And I did use a border die. This is a hillside border die, and I cut that out of the green kiwi pattern paper, and I'm just cutting the excess off here. I also used the fence die, and I cut that out of the ginger snap cardstock, and if I would have done this over again, I would have ink blended and added some dimension to this fence, but I forgot about it. I probably also would have done it to the hillside border with kiwi ink, but I didn't do that. I'm also using this vine die again, only this time I'm just cutting the die out, and I am ink blending up these leaves with some kiwi. I am going to cut these pieces apart. I did not add double-sided adhesive to the back of the die because I'm cutting all of these little leaves and these vines out of this die. So I'm cutting them apart because I want to use these for the birdhouses on the card. I want it to make it look like there are some vines going up the stem or the base of the birdhouse. I think that would be really, really pretty to do that. I do cut the flowers off of those stems or the vines. For the birdhouse stand, I did cut that out of ginger snap cardstock using the birdhouses to stamp dies, and I cut 3 of them because I'm going to have 3 birdhouses on this card. And I am adding some foam to give these birdhouses some dimension, and then I'm going to add them to the front. The larger one goes in the middle and the smaller ones on the left and right panel. I love how all these colors pop. I just think that they all look so good together. All the colors are covered in the birdhouses that are in the hearts in the background. So here I'm just adding some glue to some of these vines. And notice that I'm attaching the bottom part of the vine directly to the panel, and then the top part is actually going to be attached to the birdhouse. So cut these vines a little bit more here for the center panel. Just cut that large vine in half, and I am going to add those with some liquid glue, just to make it look there's 2 smaller vines in the middle. I'm also going to add some more vines to the front of the fence. I think this card is going to turn out super, super cute. I am using another border die and just cut a smaller hillside, and I'm going to attach 2 pieces from that large die to each of the 2 panels just to make it look like those birdhouses are also in the grass or in the hillside. I am using a rectangular die, and I'm going to use this for my sentiment, and that's cut out of the the vanilla cardstock, and this is actually a stitched rectangle die. Doesn't have to be stitched, it could be unstitched. But I cut that out of the vanilla, and then I did stamp the Hello My Dearest Friend. That stamp is from the card kit, and I'd stamped that out in the chocolate ink. So here I'm just attaching some of these vines to the fence, and then here I'm just trimming off the excess vine. I didn't want any hanging off the side, and here I'm using some of these really pretty embellishments that came with the kit just to add some flowers. I thought about just cutting some of the little flowers from the vine die set, but I thought that these would be much prettier. And that completes this card. I have a vanilla A2 size card base, and then I have another layer cut out of the vanilla paper that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. I am going to use that layer to cut a a cloud, and I'm just using the shadow layer to cut the cloud out of the top of that vanilla layer. And then I'm using the Ginger Snap cardstock. I did cut some of the stands from the birdhouses to stamp dies, and I'm going to be adding some 2 birdhouses to the front of this layer. So I'm going to go ahead and attach my birdhouses with some liquid glue, and I'm going to use that vine die set again. If you don't have any extra vines left over from the previous card, you can just cut that again with some kiwi paper, and then just cut those apart again and just add some vines to the bottoms of these birdhouses, just like in that last step card. Just adding some vines to make it look like they're growing towards the top. And I will be using that hillside border again, just like I did in the previous card, to cut a hillside border out of some green of the kiwi pattern paper. And I do add some foam to the back, not all the way to the top though, but just partially up the back of that, and then just adhere that to the bottom of that panel and cut the sides off. And here I'm taking some flowers. I did cut some of the smaller flowers out of, these are flowers from the vine set, and you can use any flowers here that you want, but I am attaching a smaller vine to that actual border, hillside border, just to give some dimension. You can see that I've kind of attached it to the inside of the border and just put some foam on the back of that. And then just adding the tops of those flowers to the vine. And then I'm using the sun. I am using the sun from the rounded corner step up card die set, and it's cut out of lemonade. The front layer is the lemonade, and then the back layer is the banana pattern paper that came with the paper pad. And I also cut the eyes and the mouth out of some vanilla cardstock, and that will be eventually attached to my card front. But first I'm going to just take a piece of the ocean. This is part of the paper pad, or you can just use ocean cardstock. Just cut a piece of that to attach underneath that cloud, and that ocean cardstock is going to be attached directly to the card base, the front of the card base where the cloud is going to be positioned. And then for the actual panel, I'm cutting some foam, and I am attaching the foam to the panel because it's going to actually be raised on the card base. And as I was putting the foam on here, I thought to myself, wow, this would make a good shaker card. You can actually turn this into a shaker card where the cloud is, but that wasn't my intent for this card, but that's a good idea for another card. So go ahead and adhere that panel to the top of the card base, and then I add my sun. I was just trying to figure out if I wanted it just in that blank space or actually overlapping the cloud, and I figured I'd like it overlapping the cloud, just as you see there. I do add a chipboard piece, the word hello, to the bottom right hand corner over top of the hillside. Add some more flowers to that front of the card, and then I'm taking these buttons, and I really love these buttons that came in the kit because they actually have a solid backing. They don't actually have the button part that usually you get from buttons in a pack that sticks out, that you end up having to cut off. So these are actually flat and they have sticky, which is really nice. And then just add some Nuvo drops to the centers of those flowers. And then of course I'm going to add my little bird, like he's sitting on top of the hello, and put some foam tape on him to give him some dimension, and that completes his card. For this next card, I'm using a banana A2 size card base, a chocolate layer that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, a little birdie told me pattern paper, and that will measure 3 1/4 by 5 1/4, and then I have a yellow strip and banana 1 3/4 by 5 1/4, and then 3 squares out of the brown chocolate pattern paper 1 1/2 by 1 5/8, and those little squares are going to be layered right on top of that banana strip. Just make sure that when you adhere them that you do your best to get them equal distance apart, just to make it look balanced on that cardstock layer. Next I'm going to take my chocolate cardstock layer and adhere that directly to my A2 size card base. And then I'm going to layer the other panels on top of that. The 3 square panel is going to be on the left, and then the A Little Birdie Told Me pattern paper is going to be on the right. And I'm going to adhere that first, just making sure you just leave a little bit of space so you can see a little bit of the chocolate brown to the top, bottom, and right side. And then I'm going to adhere the strip of the 3 squares on the right side. And again, make sure when you adhere these that there's equal space along the top, bottom, left, and right. So using your liquid glue will allow you to move the panels around until you can see that you have equal space. And then I just add 3 bird houses and a couple of the birds and some chipboard pieces. I'm going to make it look like these birds are sitting on top of these chipboard pieces. I think that will turn out really cute. So I originally wasn't going to put a sentiment, but I decided to add a hello sentiment. This is just from the Hello Hummingbird class kit, the die cut for hello. And then for the inside, I'm using a sentiment from Banana Split to stamp, and it's your birthday. And that completes this card. For card 10, I'm going to be using the Flower Vine and Grid A2 card set, only this time I'm using the card design that has the grid on it. And this has actually 6 grids that you can put different pattern papers in, and I saved this for last because I have a whole bunch of scraps that I want to use. So I'm going to start out by layering these 2 pieces, these 2 dies together. I'm going to put some washi tape, and I'm going to use this cherry colored pattern paper to die cut out the border. And it also gives me all these die cuts for all these little squares. If you wanted to, you can turn them around and use the opposite side for some of the squares, but I chose not to. Instead, I'm going to use some hearts, and notice that I'm just taking some scrap papers and I'm just cutting them down to approximate size and then just adding some washi tape to tape to the die itself. And I'm going to use some hearts on 2 of the larger grids, and the 2 medium-sized grids I'm going to be using some ocean pattern paper, and then the middle ones I'm just going to use some of the birdhouse and bird borders that are on some of the papers. So again, just cutting the little pieces, attaching them using washi tape, and then I'm going to take this entire die with the papers attached and run it through my die cut machine. Again, this design works so good if you have lots of different scrap papers that you just want to use up, and it's so easy to use. So once that's out of the die cut machine, I just take the washi tape off and take the pattern paper out of the die and make sure that the washi tape is off of the pattern paper as well. And then I'm just going to use my I'm using a vanilla card base that's A2 in size, and then just adding glue to the border that I initially cut out. Now if you wanted to add a rectangular background behind this border, you can do that by just running the large rectangle die that came in the kit, that came in the die set. Just running that through another piece of colored cardstock. But I chose not to. I'm just adhering it straight to my vanilla card base. I am using the thanks sentiment that came with the stamp set and adding some chipboard hearts right underneath it. And I'm going to add a couple of birdhouses. Again, these are my absolute favorite colors, the cherry and the ocean of the cardstock colors that Stamps of Life sells. They're my absolute favorite. And then I'm just going to add a ribbon around the side, tie it in a bow, and that is going to complete this card. Super easy and fun. I love how simple this die set is to use. So
here are all the cards that I made with this kit. There are 10 cards total. As you know, if you've been watching my videos in the past, I don't usually make 10 cards, but I kind of went crazy with this kit because I had so many birdhouses that I was able to die cut from that paper pad, and I still had so many birdhouses left over. I didn't even use half of what I die cut. So there are so many possibilities, and I hope you enjoyed these cards and this tutorial. Please go ahead and subscribe to my channel for more card making inspiration, and follow me on Instagram at Lisa Mears Card Designs. Have a great day. Bye bye.